There's a bit of a 2014 vibe running through HITC Sevens at the moment, which was categorically the year in which my life peaked. It was also the last year, prior to the last few months, in which I played a really meaningful amount of Football Manager, and maybe there's some correlation between the two. I played FM14 to death, and at the risk of sounding a little like Jay on the Inbetweeners, it's the only edition of the game in which I won both the Premier League and the Champions League with Hull City. I know, I pretty much completed it. So today's video is a throwback to FM14 and the 7 Wonderkids with the highest potential on that particular game. These aren't 7 that I've curated to make the FM scouts look terrible or brilliant, these are literally the 7 highest potential players, which I think is more interesting since it gives you a good idea of how accurate FM can be in predicting early player potential. Since my last Football Manager video, quite a lot of you have commented and messaged me asking me to do a Football Manager Save as a series on the channel or live stream my games and all that kind of a thing. My sincere apologies, but I'm not going to do that, since James from HITC Sport runs a gaming specific channel called Alexpo, and I don't want to step on any toes. Having said that, I will give an update on my Bristol City save at the end of this video for any of you who are particularly interested. So go subscribe to Alexpo, obviously make sure you're subscribed to HITC Sevens, sit back and enjoy. Here are the 7 highest potential Wonderkids on FM14. Where are they now? Bernard, Everton. For the second time in just 3 days, bite-sized Brazilian Bernard is featured on HITC Sevens. On Saturday, we talked about Bernard since he was Brazil's youngest player at the 2014 World Cup, and he also happens to have been the Wonderkid with the joint highest potential of any Brazilian on FM14. Bernard had just turned 21 when the game came out, having arrived in the hotbed of Brazilian talent that is Shakhtar Donetsk earlier that year. Bernard spent 5 seasons in Ukraine before joining Everton on a free transfer in 2018, where he has since made 55 appearances. Bernard is a good player, and he could still be a very good one for Everton, but he hasn't become the all-time, or at least generational great that FM14 predicted. Bernard isn't playing Champions League football at the age of 27, and his last game for Brazil came 6 years ago in a 7-1 defeat to Germany in the World Cup semi-finals. Rafinha, Celta Vigo. It's an all-Brazilian affair in this 7 so far, but Bernard and Rafinha are your lot from football's adopted home. Rafinha is a really talented footballer, best suited to playing in attacking midfield, but he has had a horrible time with injuries. Rafinha suffered knee cartilage damage back in 2017, he has done the cruciate ligaments in his right leg twice, and he's had a string of less serious layoffs as well. Those 3 setbacks alone are enough to end many careers, and they have taken their toll on the Brazilian who is still contracted to Barcelona. On FM14, Rafinha became a talismanic midfield creator at Barcelona for a decade, almost like the second coming of Andres Iniesta, but the reality has been a little different. Following 36 appearances in the 2014-15 season, as Barcelona won both the La Liga title and the Champions League, Rafinha has failed to hold down a regular spot in the Barca first team. He has been sent out on loan to Inter Milan and Celta Vigo, he's only won 2 caps for Brazil, and he's made fewer than 10 La Liga appearances for Barcelona over the last 3 seasons. Rafinha, who is currently in his second loan spell with Celta, has the talent to be a very good La Liga player and even break back into the Brazil setup if he goes on a brilliant run without any injuries. But he'll never be the world-class dominant creative force that he became on FM14. Ravel Morrison, Middlesbrough. The careers of Bernard and Rafinha, still at Barcelona and Everton respectively, look like bona fide success stories when compared to Ravel Morrison. The potential FM14 gave to Ravel Morrison, which allowed him to become one of the best players on earth, would be backed up by almost anyone who ever trained alongside the Englishman. Sir Alex Ferguson hailed Morrison as the best kid he'd ever seen, and the youngster was training with the Manchester United first team at the age of 15. By 2013 though, when the game came out, Morrison had already spent more than 12 months away from Old Trafford, and was instead turning out for West Ham. Morrison's lofty potential came as a consequence of a couple of months of truly spectacular form under Sam Allardyce at the start of the 2013-14 campaign that made many people sit up and question whether the penny had dropped with a troubled 21-year-old, culminating in a sensational sole run and goal against Tottenham. Clearly, Sports Interactive had seen enough to predict that Morrison would become the best English player of a generation, but it wasn't to be. He soon tailed off at West Ham, with problems on and off the pitch coming to the fore. Morrison has since had stints in Italy, Mexico and Sweden before being handed a lifeline by Chris Wilder last summer, and he's currently on loan from Sheffield United and Middlesbrough. Clearly, Morrison is unlikely to ever be stood on a Ballon d'Or podium, but hopefully he can carve out a decent career in the Championship or even in the Premier League. Max Meyer, Crystal Palace. If you'd asked most people to predict where Ravel Morrison and Max Meyer would be in 6 years' time back in the summer of 2013, they probably wouldn't have guessed Middlesbrough and Crystal Palace. A graduate of the excellent Schalke Academy, Meyer had been predicted to do big things in German football from the age of 15. Meyer had only just turned 18 when the game came out, but he was already well known to those in football thanks largely to his performances at the Under-17 Euros in 2012, where he won both the Golden Boot as top scorer and the Golden Ball as the tournament's best player. Following 192 appearances for Schalke, Meyer ran down his contract, but didn't find European giants clamouring for his signature. In the end, his most lucrative option was a move to Crystal Palace, where he has since played 50 games, and Meyer is a talent, but 4 caps to Germany at the age of 24 isn't really what FM14 had in mind. Samuel Umtiti, Barcelona. Another man whose talents were a poorly kept secret from a very young age, Samuel Umtiti already had 2 seasons of pretty regular football at Lyon under his belt when FM14 came out, aged only 19. Born in Cameroon, Umtiti's family moved to France when he was only 2 years old, and the youngster represented France at under 17, 18, 19, 20 and 21 level. It was in the summer of 2016 that Umtiti was called up for the first time by the senior France team, and he also joined Barcelona that summer for €25 million. Umtiti has proved to be a bargain for Barca, registering 115 appearances in 3.5 seasons, despite a pretty lengthy injury layoff. Umtiti has become a World Cup and 2-time La Liga title winner, and he's among the most complete centre-backs around. He perhaps isn't quite at the level of an all-time great as FM14 had predicted, but he isn't too far off, and he's come the closest of anyone in this 7 to reaching their FM14 potential so far. Adnan Januzaj, Real Sociedad. It seems like Sports Interactive were particularly reactionary ahead of the release of FM14, with Adnan Januzaj's remarkable potential seemingly down to similar circumstances to Ravel Morrison's. To give you a timeline of events, Adnan Januzaj's first start for Manchester United, in which he scored a terrific brace against Sunderland, came on October 5th. Meanwhile, FM14 was released on October 30th. Whilst Januzaj was an exciting prospect in the Manchester United youth ranks, it's hard to believe a programmer didn't quickly log in to the editor and program Januzaj to become a future Ballon d'Or winner following that game at the Stadium of Light. On FM14, Januzaj went on to become the second coming of George Best. In real life, he only ever scored 3 more goals for Manchester United, and following a couple of loan moves, Januzaj was reunited with David Moyes at Real Sociedad in 2017. 3 seasons on, the Belgian is still with the La Liga side, and he is unquestionably talented. Without any serious setbacks, Januzaj should spend a decade in the top flight of a European league and on the fringes of the Belgium squad. But if he's ever nominated for the Ballon d'Or, I'll chisel the words Januzaj's the GOAT onto the side of my house. I won't really, that's the kind of thing the Irish guy would do, but it sounded dramatic. I can see why he does it now. Rafael Varane, Real Madrid. The wonder kid with the highest potential on FM14 also happens to be the player who has most lived up to their FM14 potential in this 7. Our second French centre-back, FM14 predicted that Rafael Varane and Samuel Umtiti would both become world-class, and the duo are now regulars for Barcelona and Real Madrid, and they won a World Cup as a formidable partnership in 2018, so maybe SI are due some credit on this one. In fairness, Varane was already a Real Madrid player and a full French international when FM14 came out, and at no stage since has anyone been particularly surprised at his brilliance. Aged 27, Varane would probably make everyone's top 10 in terms of the best centre-backs on earth, most people's top 3 and some people's top 1. If I was splitting hairs, you could say that he isn't yet set to go down as one of the greatest centre-backs to have ever lived, perhaps in the same bracket as Franco Baresi or Bobby Moore, as FM14 would have had you believe given he was set to become truly godlike, but I'd be doing just that, splitting hairs. Okay, so that's it for today's video, but I did promise that I would revisit my FM20 save with Bristol City for those of you who were particularly interested when I talked about it in my previous video. I am now coming towards the end of my 5th season, the 2023-24 campaign, and there are a couple of different ways in which to assess how things are going. On the one hand, performances in the league show signs of stagnation as we finished 6th in the Premier League with similar points tallies for 3 consecutive seasons, and there's a good chance I won't even finish that high this season, although do note the 2 games in hand. That's the bad, and I am frustrated that we haven't yet managed to record a top 4 finish. On the flip side, I have still qualified for the Champions League, since last season we won the Europa League, or the Euro Cup as it's known on FM, thanks to a pretty convincing 4-1 win against Atletico Madrid in the final. Essentially, on my watch, the Robins have become the ultimate cup team. Seriously, our success in the cup competitions is incredible. In our first season in the Premier League, we won the Carabao Cup. The following season, we won both the FA Cup and the Euro Cup too. Last season, we successfully defended our FA Cup crown and won the Euro Cup, and this season, we have already won both the Community Shield and the Carabao Cup. I just lost to Chelsea in the semi-finals of the FA Cup, and we've got Manchester United to face in the semi-finals of the Champions League. The average age of the team is also about 23, with a few players with really ridiculous potential. The challenge in truth is going to be keeping hold of everyone and of course trying to get not just into the top 4, but to win the creme de la creme, the Premier League title. And since, why not, here are a handful of my highest potential regions. Got them all? Okay. Meanwhile, I'd recommend anyone who is loading up a new game to try and sign Karim Adeyemi from RB Salzburg, as he has been utterly inspired for me, and I've already had to turn down £100 million plus bids. Right. I'll probably wrap that up there since I feel like I'm just talking into an abyss, and as Nietzsche said, if you talk into the abyss for long enough about your FM20 Bristol City save, the abyss will talk back to you. Alright, he said gaze into, and he didn't mention Bristol City or FM20, but it's close enough. Thank you all for watching, yes, all 3 of you who are still tuned in, and are now as bored of hearing about how many times I've won the Carabao Cup as my girlfriend. Hit the like button if you enjoyed any of my inane rambling, let us know your thoughts on how I can crack league success as well as cup dominance in the comments, and as always, feel free to subscribe to the one and only HITC Sevens.